Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming down tonight. We are live from Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, so a note to our internet audience watching at home, if at any time during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of tonight's book, you can just call the number on your screen. We'll take care of that for you. We'll have the author sign it for you, and we'll ship it to you wherever you are in the United States free of charge. This evening, Books and Books is happy to present Mr. Matt Ziselman and his new book, Hounded, The Lowdown on Life from Three Dachshunds. Got lowdown, I like that, don't think I? Yes. Mr. Ziselman has worked for a wide array of advertising agencies, first as a copywriter and then as a creative director. In this charming and humorous memoir, Matt's life has gone completely to the dogs, courtesy of his three dachshunds, Baxter, Maya, and Molly. By sharing the antics any dog lover will relish, along with memories of his own life, Matt weaves a canine-inspired, common-sense tapestry of life lessons. Neither a pet book nor a people book, Hounded offers the best of both, poignantly illustrating the special relationships that Matt has with three very special dogs. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Matt Ziselman.
It's great to be here and see so many friendly, familiar faces. And needless to say, you will all receive your checks next week. For many years, I thought about writing a book. I didn't know what I was going to write about. Didn't have really any idea, but I knew that I had something I wanted to say. One thing I can tell you is that at no point throughout those years did I ever think I was going to write about three dachshunds. That's not something that sort of occurs naturally. And in the end, I really didn't have a say in it. Actually, the one responsible for writing this book was this one right here. That's Baxter. He's the reason I wrote this book, and I'll tell you how it came to be. Most dogs have some type of obsession, whether it's with a particular toy or whether it's chasing squirrels in the yard. Baxter's obsession, without sounding too egotistical, Baxter's obsession is me. And it's not necessarily that he's obsessed with showing me affection or giving me companionship. He's obsessed basically just looking at me, particularly staring at me. Baxter's thing is staring. And he doesn't stare. It's not like when you see a dog that's on a sofa or a chair and they're lying there and they just happen to be looking at you pleasantly and it's very sweet. Baxter's stare is closer to punishment, abuse. So one day I was sitting on the sofa and I was watching TV, and Baxter comes in and I notice him in my peripheral vision, and he's this black and tan little blob that walks slowly into the room. And I'm watching TV, and I sense that he just is standing there. He's not doing anything. He's not looking at anyone but me. And I'm trying my best to ignore him, because I know if I make eye contact, it's on. That's it. Then we're into an immediate staring competition, and I know who's going to win, hands down. So I'm watching TV, and I see him walk a few steps closer. He doesn't sit down. He just stands there in the middle of the room. And he's done this millions of times. But on this particular day, for whatever reason, I don't know why, when I stared back at him, I saw something more than just looking. And it wasn't that he was looking through me or looking past me. He was looking with a sense of intent, as if he was trying to say something. And it wasn't, I'm hungry, I need to go out, or I'm hungry. He was trying to tell me something. And at that particular time, I was struggling trying to find a subject to write about, an idea. And at that moment, Baxter gave me the idea. It was this notion that my dogs weren't just communicating with each other, they were communicating with me. And they had something to teach me about life. And at that point, I was struggling with an idea for the book, and I was going through some personal challenges, and it sort of struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I said, I'm going to write about them. And that's what I proceeded to do. I sat down without any real outline of what I was going to write about or any kind of structure, and I just started writing, trusting that whatever would come out would be usable. Maybe it was misplaced trust, but that's the way I approached it. And just sat at the keyboard and just began. And at a certain point in the process, I stopped writing, mainly because it was the end of a paragraph, and I sat there and took a break, and I was just basically staring at a wall, trying to think of the next thing to write. And the next thing I knew, I started writing again, and I wrote 2 or 3 sentences, and I looked down and I realized I started writing about myself. I didn't plan that. It just sort of happened organically. I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue that perspective, but I also didn't want to edit myself. I didn't want to go away from that, because I felt that for whatever reason it was strong enough that it made me do that. So maybe I should push forward with it. And I started writing more about myself and different events in my life. And what I suddenly realized was that what my dogs were teaching me about life were lessons that I could have really benefited from during these certain challenges that I faced. And I didn't know if that was the right way to go, because all I wanted to do was write a book about my dogs, that's all. A little silly book. And I didn't want it to become this serious book. I didn't want people to perceive it as, well, it's a memoir about a person who's had challenges. I didn't want to do that. But at the same time, I had to sort of follow that path that had just presented itself to me. And that's what I did. And I didn't realize what I had written until last October. I was invited to speak at a Doctoberfest in Maryland, which is basically about 1,000 people and their dachshunds coming together to talk about all things dachshund. So they asked me, would you be interested? And I said, well, you know, what's it going to be like? And they said, well, there'll be about 1,000 people and 500 dachshunds. I said, I'm in. So I went down there and met a lot of nice people, saw a bunch of dogs, and it was amazing that we didn't leave with a couple more dachshunds in our car. Sold a bunch of books. And when I was signing my book, there was a woman who was sort of hovering around the table, and we had brought 2 of the dogs with us, and we had them in like a portable playpen. And people were coming in, and they were, you know, playing with their dogs and whatnot. And this woman was a little standoffish. She was just hesitant about something. And after about 10 minutes or so, she came up to me, and she said she wanted to buy a book. I said, great. And I asked her name, and I signed the book, and she started telling me how much she liked the book. And she was very generous with her words, very, very kind. And it was lovely. And as I was talking with her, I noticed that my wife was talking with a gentleman who I assumed was her husband. So I shook her hand, we took a picture together, and she went on her way. And my wife finished speaking with the gentleman. So my wife came over to me, and I said, you missed this lady who was just here. She was really, really nice. Really liked the book, loved it. And she said to me, well, I was talking to her husband. And I said, well, what did he have to say? And she said, her husband was telling me that over the past several years, this woman was in a very, very deep depression, really struggling with life. And nothing was really sort of jarring her out of her mindset that she was in. And for whatever reason, she read the book, and the way he put it, it lightened her. And she found some, the way he said, you know, light in the dark. And he kept saying to my wife, you have no idea what this book meant to her. And it was wonderful because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you're talking about this little silly dog book. And he said to my wife, well, you have to understand that for certain people, it's not going to be a dog book, it's going to be a people book. And that's what you wrote. You wrote a people book. So imagine my surprise when I heard that. And it was a very pleasant surprise. And that's when I realized that it all depends on who's reading the book. And some people will see it and it will be a dog book, and some people will see it and see a people book. And that was probably, I've been very fortunate to receive a lot of nice reviews about the book over time. And that was probably my favorite. It was probably the shortest, but definitely my favorite. What I'd like to do now is read a chapter from the book. And just as a point of reference, this particular chapter has to do with Molly. And she's our littlest dachshund here. Yeah. Okay. Now all I have to do is find it. Bear with me. Okay. Okay. So the title of this chapter is "The Squeaky Wheel Gets the Grease, the Whimpering Wheel Gets a Treat." You know that scene in Shrek 2 where Shrek and Donkey first meet Puss? The one where he stares at Shrek and Donkey with his eyes as big as saucers, welling with heavy tears? Well, Puss has nothing on Molly. Molly is another Texas transplant. She's what's called a piebald dachshund because her fur is all mottled black, white, and tan. She's a tiny thing, maybe 12 pounds on a really, really humid day. As I already mentioned, overall, Molly's a pretty happy dog. In fact, the woman we got her from used to call her Jolly Molly for that reason. Nothing seems to get Molly down. She never gets too high, never gets too low. She's just a really pleasant dog. Although there is one thing that Molly does that brings me and anyone else within earshot very down. When she wants attention, and when it suits her needs, Molly can be quite the drama queen. I'll set the scene. I'm sitting on the couch reading a book. After several moments, I sense a presence next to me. Without glancing over, I already know what's going to happen next. A small, wet nose inserts itself under my forearm and begins pushing my arm up. I then feel her short, smooth fur brush under my arm, culminating in about 14 inches of dachshund sidling next to me. She's pushing against me like she wants me to give her my lunch money. I ignore her. Molly does not like to be ignored. And so she resorts to the one thing that she excels at, other than being happy. She goes all Bambi on my ass. She cries. I kept all the documents that we received when we adopted Molly, and I remember going through them pretty thoroughly. But I can't seem to recall if she ever attended the actor's studio or had a 5-episode arc on Days of Our Lives. This dog can turn on the waterworks like a pro, practically on cue. But the truth is, her true power lies not in crying, but in preventing herself from crying. The one thing sadder than seeing someone cry is seeing someone on the verge of crying. The quivering lower lip, the flush in the cheeks, eyes pregnant with buckets of salty sentiment, ready to sodden the first available shoulder. Crying is sad. Almost crying is painful. I look at her. Her huge doe-like eyes stare at me. The perfect amount of moisture perched precariously on the rim of her lower eyelid, adding just the right touch of patheticness. She doesn't blink. This dog doesn't blink. She's a freak. I'm not kidding. She stares. The wetness builds. I stare. Her whiskers tremble. She's the Meryl Streep of her generation, or at the very least, of her litter. I remain unmoved. They're not real tears. She's not actually crying. I'm being ridiculous. She's a dog. And then, cue the sound effects, the whimpering begins. They start off more as a very soft vibration, like a Sonicare toothbrush that's almost out of battery power. You don't hear her whimpers as much as feel them. Apparently, at some point in her past, Molly crossed paths with George Lucas, because what's going on in her body and in my ears is at a quality and magnitude that surely involves the talented folks at Industrial Light and Magic. No response from Daddy. So she goes sonic. My back molars start to hurt. My eyes wince. A crystal flower vase begins to tremble ever so slightly. Somewhere in the Arctic Ocean, beluga whales are having hissy fits. I know she's sitting right next to me, safe as can be, but she sounds as if Laurence Olivier is peppering her with the same question over and over. Is it safe to leave you home alone and not put you in your crate? Chilling, truly chilling. I know what she's doing. It's nothing new. She just wants something. Perhaps she wants to go outside where she'll do nothing but lay in the driveway. Or maybe she's angling for a treat which she'll inhale and ultimately act as nothing more than a whining intermezzo. Or she's whining because she wants attention. Those are the possibilities in their entirety. Molly has a very short menu. Don't give in, Matt. Molly, stop it. Eyes welling, welling, welling. Keith Moon is doing a solo on my eardrums. Matt, don't. We go outside. Turns out it was lying in the driveway whine. Shocking. I think she's actually smiling at me. What can I say? I am but a mortal man, and more than a little jealous. When Molly wants something, she uses everything in her arsenal to get it. Me? I sit there waiting for the cosmos to bring things to me. I guess there's something to be said for saying something. Not that I would know. I can't say for certain, given the passage of time and the failing of memory that goes with it, but I can't seem to recall ever being told to shut up. I don't mean in conversation. Of course, I've had my share of, dude, shut the hell up and be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. What I mean is that nobody has ever told me to shut up because I was simply talking too much. I'm not a mute. I'm not an Ellen Jamesian from The World According to Garp with a little pad and pencil hanging from my neck. It's just that given the choice, I prefer listening to speaking. Turns out I'm in good company. Thomas Jefferson was notorious for saying little in the way of conversation or commentary. Turns out he was a bit more comfortable with the old quill and ink. Safe to say he got his points across rather well, wouldn't you agree? The Godfather wasn't much of a great conversationalist, and yet through coercion and intimidation and the odd assassination or two, he let people know what he was thinking. You got a problem with that? I didn't think so. I speak when I have something to say, and when I'm done, I stop speaking. I'm pretty sure that's how it's supposed to work. What's really sad is that I come into contact with far too many people who don't seem to have any issues with continuing to speak long after they have anything of interest to say. Oh well, that's just Matt. He doesn't talk much, is a pretty common comment on my silence. But I'm fine with it. It's just the way I am, which is not to say that my lack of verbosity hasn't come back to bite me in the ass on more than one occasion. If nice guys finish last, then guys who choose not to talk a lot finish just a few scant paces ahead of the nice guys. But hey, at least I'm not one of those losers, right? I've been in many situations, particularly in my career, where I should have said something, should have made my position known, but I didn't. Times when I knew that the general consensus wasn't my consensus, but chose to simply go with the rest of the herd. And I've had moments where I should have tooted my own horn, assumed someone else would toot it for me, and was left totally tootless. I don't like confrontation. I'm sure that's been a big part of it. If you don't say anything, then nobody can debate you on it. And if you don't debate, you can't lose that debate. I guess I've always felt that in time things would always work themselves out, that I would at some point get the recognition I was due. For the most part, I'm still waiting. Things changed for me. Well, I changed for me when I was 19. And as with so many moments of change, it was a change born from a death. My dad was not what you would call a wallflower. Born and raised in Brooklyn, my dad had a personality as big as the borough he called home. He was boisterous and engaging, fun and friendly, and as most dads seem to be in their child's memories, afraid of nothing, which is to say he was nothing like me. Shortly after we moved to Long Island, when I was around 12, I joined a local football league. The team used to practice on a large field that separated the grammar school from the high school, and on one side of that field were a row of houses. One of those houses was mine. And on the other side of that fence that ran the length of that field, through every practice, was my dad. Through every sprint, pass, and huddle, he would stand there smoking his cigarettes, exhorting me through my drills. And with every "attaboy, Matty," I want to seep into the cleat-churned grass and disappear. Dad, can you please not yell so loud? I would plead. I told him it was breaking my concentration, when in reality it was breaking my will to live. I was beyond embarrassed. I felt like a spotlight was being shined upon me, emphasizing every block I missed and every ragged breath I drew. In other words, I was trying my best to do what every 12-year-old boy tries to do when among other 12-year-old boys, not stand out. And here was this loud, and I mean really loud guy, not more than 50 feet away from me, doing everything in his power to the contrary. How can he be my dad? I'd often wonder. We're nothing alike. Maybe there was a mix-up at the hospital, and my dad in reality was a quiet, somewhat bookish British expat whose idea of a good time was sequestering himself in a wood-paneled library in front of a crackling fire while thumbing through a first edition of Finnegan's Wake. Alas, my birth certificate and my mother's undying defense of the fine folks in the maternity ward at Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, proved fairly conclusively that this was not the case. Apparently, the lunatic on the other side of the fence was mine. But only until I was 19. My family had recently moved to Los Angeles after my parents purchased an automotive repair franchise in Hollywood in an attempt to give their 3 sons a better sun-kissed, palm tree-lined life. We absolutely hated it. We hated that it felt foreign. We hated that our friends were now 3,000 miles away. My brothers hated being the new kids in school, and I hated trying to maintain a relationship with my girlfriend over the phone, a relationship that ended only a couple of months after we moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in Sherman Oaks, a suburb of Los Angeles. I have a very vivid memory of lying in one of those bedrooms one night, pining away from my now ex-girlfriend, listening to a local FM station that specialized in Steely Dan, the Eagles, and Fleetwood Mac. I even remember the exact date, not because I have some remarkable ability to remember dates. Most people my age remember that date. Many people remember it. December 8th, 1980. The music abruptly faded out. The DJ came on to somberly announce that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside the Dakota in New York City. Up to that point in my life, I experienced the odd moment of sadness. But that night, in that awful bedroom, hearing that terrible news, sadness proceeded to bend me into a fetal ball of temper and tears. It wasn't long after that awful night that we all agreed that California just wasn't for us, and we'd go back home. All except one. My dad loved California. He took to it like a native. He marveled at the weather, the friendliness of the people. Mostly the opportunity was affording him to provide a better life for his family. And he simply could not understand how anyone could not, as Randy Newman sang at the time, love LA. But we didn't. So after much discussion between my parents, it was decided that we'd sell the shop, move back to New York, and start from scratch. My mom, brothers, and I were ecstatic. My dad was basically resigned. The plan was that we would all move back home, except for my dad, who'd remain out there to sell the shop and then join us back in New York. My mom quickly found an apartment in a two-family house back in our hometown of Valley Stream. My brothers started school again, and I debated whether or not to enroll in a local college. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with myself. The whole California situation left me pretty rattled and unsure what path my life would or should take. Fortunately, the college decided for me. I missed the cutoff date to enroll, which left me with nothing but time on my hands and no productive way in which to fill it. My mom suggested that since I wasn't going to school, maybe I should go out to LA, keep my father company while I was trying to sell the shop. I said as long as it was temporary, I'd be happy to go. And besides, I missed my dad. He had moved into a studio apartment that was close to the shop, which was actually located at the intersection of Melrose and Vine, a redheaded stepchild to the more famous intersection of Hollywood and Vine. I spent a lot of time in the tiny apartment watching bad daytime TV and talking on the phone with my mom, keeping her informed of my dad's efforts to get the both of us back home where we belonged. One day in March 1981, the phone rang, and I assumed it was my mother just checking in. "Hi, is this Matt Ziselman?" a serious-toned adult asked. "Yes, who's this?" "Matt, my name is Dr. F. I work at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. Your father was just brought in here about 15 minutes ago complaining of chest pains and shortness of breath. He told us to call this number and speak to you. Matt, is your mom there? Can I speak to her?" "Not now, please, not here." "My mom's in New York. Is he going to be okay? What happened to him?" "Matt, do you have a car? Do you drive?" "My dad had the car. Mom. Okay, do you have someone, a relative that can drive you here?" "Well, I can ask my Uncle Bill. I can call him." "Okay, Matt, that sounds good. It's Kaiser Foundation on Sunset Boulevard. Again, my name is Dr. F. Did you write all of that down? Go to the emergency room, ask for me, and I'll come get you. Okay? Do you understand?" "I do. I'm going to call my uncle, and we'll be right down." "Okay, Matt. Is he okay? Is he going to be okay?" "Matt, hang up. Call your uncle." I don't actually remember calling my uncle or getting to the hospital. My memory abruptly picks up again in a room filled with three things: people, machines, and my dad. "Matt? Matt, are you all right?" I managed a nod as I stared at the scene in front of me, where the only person not moving was my father. The air was peppered with requests and demands. "I want to start a line in ephemeral, please. What's his respiration?" "Matt, your dad has had a heart attack. Right now, we're doing everything we can to stabilize him. Does your dad smoke?" "Yes." "Okay. Can someone please give me a blood ox level?" "Do you know if he's on any medication?" "I don't know." He leaned away from me and whispered something into a nurse's ear. "Matt, where's your uncle?" "He's outside parking the car. He's coming. What's happening?" "Matt," he began while gently pulling me just outside the door of the room. "We're doing our best right now to help keep your father alive, but he's very sick. I want you to listen really carefully to what I'm saying. Your dad is still conscious. He's still able to communicate with us. I want him to talk to your mother." "Well, she's not here. She's in New York." Beep, 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 beep. "I know. We can call her right now and put her on the phone with your dad. Is that so she can tell you it's okay to do whatever you need to help him? Because I can tell you that right now." He interrupted me by placing his hand on my shoulder. "Matt," he said in a softer, steady tone, "I want them to talk to each other." He stopped speaking, but he kept looking at me. He was waiting for me to take in what he had just said. Is he going to die?" I managed to coax from my clenching throat. "Matt, your father is very sick. I don't know if he's going to make it through the night. I want him to hear your mom. I want your mom to hear him. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I paused a minute to admit to myself that I understood. "Yeah." "Would you like me to talk to her first?" "No, I'll do it." "Okay, come over here." He guided me between the bodies and machines that were now keeping my father's life from leaving him. I arrived at a small bedside table with a phone on it. "Press 9 first, and then dial your mom's number, okay?" The noise in the room dropped several respectful decibels, so all I heard were the various sounds of the different machines. I reached for the phone receiver with my right hand and cradled it between my right ear and right shoulder. As I began to dial a number and prepare to break my mother's heart, my left hand was suddenly filled with another. I looked at my dad's hand in mine. My eyes tracked past the tubes and wires that dotted and assaulted his arm, shoulder, and chest. My gaze eventually arrived at his face, where I found his eyes locked onto mine. They were wet and pleading. I offered a trembling smile. His lips moved. With the receiver still pressed to my right ear, I leaned in and put my left ear next to his mouth, where in a tremulous whisper I heard, "Okay, don't be scared. Love you. Going to be okay." "Hello," my mom said on the 5th ring. My hand never left his. My mom flew out to be with him during his recovery. A week passed. Early one morning she answered the phone and was told that he had died an hour earlier. I suppose it's natural when you experience something like that for your mind to rewind through the past years, the times you've had, the people you had them with. I thought a lot about my dad in the weeks and months that followed, and it was amazing how his loudness suddenly didn't seem so loud. How his antics on the other side of the fence and in the bleachers on game day stopped being antics and became a father's pride writ large for all to see. After he was gone, none of it seemed as embarrassing as it once did, and that changed me. Right or wrong, I came to the conclusion that my dad was the way he was for 2 reasons. The first was that it was just his personality. Some people are just born bigger than others, people whose personalities can't be contained by the barrier of their bones or the cover of their skins. Their life force overflows their borders. The second reason was that the world demands it. Let's face it, the world has neither the patience nor the inclination to listen to those who whimper, to those who expect to be recognized simply by showing up. Woody Allen even once famously said that 80% of success is just showing up. I think the other 20% is making your presence known once you do. My dad was a 20% man. Not too long after my dad died, I began to notice a gradual change in myself. I started to chime in more on conversations. I began offering unsolicited opinions. I started listening to what was being said around me. And if I didn't like what I was hearing, or I disagreed with what I was hearing, I let people know about it. In ways both large and small, I started to make my feelings known. And one of the first things I felt was this: I wasn't born my father's son, but in my 19th year, I think I became my father's son. I'm still speaking up. In fact, this book is a form of me speaking up. And while speaking up and making my presence known doesn't always result in anything even close to a golden ticket, I feel better for having said something. I feel better for being heard. So, as it turns out, Jolly Molly has the right idea. Try as I might, I can't ignore her. She won't hear of it. And so the chin trembles, the eyes moisten, and the tears hang suspended on the lower rim of a Bambi-shaped eye. Hey, it works for her. Stick with your strengths, I say. Personally, tears aren't my thing. Let's face it, I don't really have the cheekbones for optimal tear flow. But fear not, if I want your attention, I'll get it. If I have something to say, you'll know it. After all, I am my father's son. Dachshund Life Lesson number 6, be heard. Thank you. And happy to answer any questions or comments or anything anyone might have about their doggies or the Heat game. Well, okay, well, I thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to me. So thank you very much.
All right. All right, folks. Well, if there are no questions, then a reminder for our internet audience at home, there's still time for you to call the number on your screen Purchase a copy of the book. We'll have Matt sign it for you, and we'll ship it to wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. Also, a reminder that all of our live streamed events are archived. So you can visit the Books and Books website, go to the live streaming link, and any author appearance that's been broadcast here from the store will be saved there for you to watch at your convenience. For those of you here in the house, we have Hounded for sale at the counter over there. Matt's going to be signing over here at the table to the left of the podium, and that was a great reading. Please give Matt another hand. Thanks very much.